Good on you, Jared. Our special guest tonight is the man who saved North Melbourne. Their chairman, James Brayshaw, joins us. Hello and welcome again to On the Couch following a magical round of finals footy. I've got two big guns in the studio. They both had big weekends in Jason Dunstall and Mike Sheehan.
Hey, Jared.
Your finals form wasn't quite as good as Jason's, but welcome to you, Jason.
Thanks, mate. Much appreciated.
What took your fancy over the weekend, Mike?
Well, it's a question, Jared, I've got. After watching Friday and Saturday night's games, I wonder whether Geelong was hasty in cutting Paul Chapman. Now, I want you to answer this, Jace, but before you do, I want to give you some information. His last game for Geelong was a final against Port Adelaide. He had 20 possessions and kicked 4 goals. At Essendon this year, he's played 20 games, averaged 20 possessions, and kicked 22 goals with 13 assists. I watched Geelong the other night, and they got one bloke who can kick multiple goals, and that's Tommy Hawkins. And I watched Essendon the other night, and it was Chapman who put them 7 goals in front. Did they make a wrong decision at Geelong?
OK, I understand what you're saying. At face value, the easy answer is to say yes. But unfortunately, it's never that simple because it comes back to what term, what dollars they're looking for, the final contract of your career. It's never as simple as you'd like it to be.
He was cut, though.
For a reason.
Well, because he wanted too much coin?
Well, I suspect that management and club were a little bit separated on what they thought was fair and reasonable.
You can have a go at this too?
No, at the time I thought it was the right decision. I didn't think there was much footy left in Chappie, and he's had a pretty good year. I think they needed some room to get the Christensen, younger, smaller players in, and I think they've got 2 or 3 of those. Unfortunately, Christensen didn't get there.
I've got the benefit of the hindsight. I think they made a blue. I reckon.
What about on J-Pod? Do you think they made a blue there?
No.
Because of Vardy?
Yes, well, and they were unlucky with Vardy because Vardy went down, he was going to play and he was going to take that spot. But anyway, all subjective.
And do you judge the Chapman one year in or perhaps at the end of the second year?
No, we're going to do it after 1 year in because that's what he's done. We're basing it on data now.
That's where you're saying, did they make a mistake? Well, you've got to wait until the deal's played itself out, haven't you?
Looking forward to your mad minute, Mike.
There's a rumour going around, Jared. He apparently is going to name a Hawthorn player that Mike Sheehan believes has single-handedly kept Geelong's premiership hopes alive.
That's bizarre, Jason, but that's correct.
That's why
hang around. You stay, will you?
I will.
That's why you're so mad. What about you, Jason? What did you want to focus on?
Jared, I'm pretty sure that there'll be no Tiger supporters laughing at this. But if ever something typified the day for the Richmond Football Club, it's this bit of vision here. Now, and I tell you why I love it. If you're going to do it properly.
Yep.
So he gives away the 50 by slinging him, then he pushes him, then he actually tries to kick the footy over the fence. I thought it was hilarious. But that typified everything that went wrong, did go wrong, and he just had enough and said...
I agree totally with you.
He threw everything out, didn't he?
He represented 500,000 Richmond supporters in that 30-second pass.
It was amazing frustration. We'll take a look at it right throughout the show. But
now let's get...
I'm glad he didn't kick the ball because that would have been perhaps a little bit too far.
We wanted him to kick it, didn't we?
I wanted him to go over the fence. It would have just topped it off nicely.
Let's get strategic. What did you see from the Cats on Friday night?
Well, what took my fancy on Friday night, the name Jimmy Stynes just kept coming and coming and coming. I've been talking about this kid right throughout the season, Mark Blixarves, and his performance in the ruck said to me that Hamish McIntosh is in big trouble. I think they need to get something special in the middle, and I'll show you why later on in the program. But I reckon this kid on the weekend showed that he can become an A-grade force in the competition.
Well, this is quarter 4, and he's got the jump, he's got the spring, and I think their time over again, Jace, they would have said the match-up with Hill on the wing didn't work. And look, he probably embarrassed Hamish McIntosh with his mobility and his spring, didn't he? I
think he's almost a certain to be the first ruck. It's just a gut feel. I think Hamish McIntosh, I'm not sure whether or not he's injured or not, but just if you're a little bit slow at the present time, add some dash to the middle, and that kid's got everything. I'm not sure what his upper end is, Jason, but I looked at Jimmy Stynes coming through and I thought, geez, this kid's got some potential. This bloke's improvement has been greater than anybody else this year.
Super talent, but I think the thing I found most extraordinary was that you can start on the wing, play on the wing, and then rotate through the ruck. I mean, there aren't many players, if any, that could do that.
His opponents on the night were Brad Hill and David Hale. Incredible. And what was incredible was Port Adelaide. The force of Port Adelaide's performance in the first few minutes had that game over. I haven't seen many finals over in 5 minutes, Mike, but that one was.
Yeah, I reckon that conservatively, when they kicked their 7th, wasn't it, after 17 minutes? I mean, but the momentum was massive, and you could tell they're in massive trouble from the start, the Tigers. the way
well, they got off to a flyer.
They did.
I think the disappointing thing from Richmond's perspective was no one stood up to stop this run on. But when you have a look at them, it was just overwhelming, wasn't it? The way they surged forward in numbers. And that's the thing that always sticks out, are the number of options they have when they get the ball.
They just got it in too easily, didn't they? And they got through the guys who should have been tackling. Yeah. And the fumbles from the Richmond blokes. It was just a disaster for Richmond, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And look at the numbers running forward.
Well, I reckon one of those moments when Dusty got knocked off the ball
by Jake Need.
The game was over. I mean, you could be nice and say it was over after the 6th or 7th goal, Mike, but the first 5 minutes, I mean, that is so much taking the mickey out of your opposition that the game was clearly done and dusted.
Now, it's difficult in such a short time. I don't know what a bloke does to fly the flag, but Brett Delidio was the culprit there. The senior blokes, it just obviously was happening around and they couldn't do anything. But there was no one who stood up and actually sort of said, we have to halt the momentum here. Was there?
Well, it was irrepressible momentum, though. I'm not sure who could have stopped it at the time. But really now the challenge is for Port Adelaide. Can they go against history? And history says you don't make the big finals if you start from outside the bottom 4. So,
but they're a very good 5th team, aren't they?
They are, and they went close a couple of weeks ago over in Perth.
Well, Ken Hinkley addressed that after the match, and he's got no fears.
Freo were an amazing side, and they, I love the way they play. I love the way they're coached. I know we're going to go over there and give a real good account of ourselves, though, and we certainly don't go over there with too many fears. We go over there with with a bit of a freedom to go and play the game. There's a big prize on offer, though.
Well, it's a massive prize. You get a spot in the prelim final, and then who knows where it finishes. Are you prepared to say now, Mike, that that Port Adelaide can win the flag?
I wouldn't go that. I think they're 50-50 this weekend, particularly if Ballantyne doesn't play and if Sandy Lands' knee flared as it looked like it did in Sydney at the weekend. I reckon they're a genuine 50-50 chance.
Oh, they can win this week. There's no doubt about that. I'm not 100% convinced I'm going to tip them yet because of the historical factors that you were talking about, but they are a brilliant chance. Tell you what they did do on the weekend is they gave Richmond a lesson in work rate because this is a team that runs both ways, and I think we found out that Richmond is a team that runs one way. You have a look at a couple of occasions here where they're going forward. Keep your eye on the corridor here. Now they're queuing up. Look at that. And there are a host of Richmond players just trailing in. Now, in the end, they didn't need to use them. Such were the options that they had going forward. Dustin Martin won't like it when he has a look at this one. I mean, that's a half-hearted chase. Look, mind you, he might have been involved a couple of times and he's out of breath, but have a look at the ease with which they go forward, the space and the time that they've got to use the footy. They identify targets. This is training drill stuff.
Yep.
And just finding loose targets. And if that's not bad enough in the corridor, look at Jared Pollock, who's just wandered forward. Take your time, chip it over.
That's an indictment on them, isn't there?
Yeah, it was.
You can be outplayed by a team that's better, but they were clearly outworked, weren't they?
Correct.
That's true, but they've come off 9 elimination
Do you reckon that was
finals.
enough? Do you think when they got into the finals?
Well, I can't interpret it any other way. I mean, Richmond are simply not that bad, and Port Adelaide are simply not that good. The gap between them isn't that vast. Surely it must have been as much psychological as physical.
Damien Hardwick and the coaches would have said that to them the whole week, wouldn't they? They would have celebrated the fact that they got in.
I'm not prepared to concede that that's an excuse.
No,
because for me, one of the most important ingredients going into September is momentum. They had it.
OK, so if you're giving them no excuse from a psychological perspective, where are Richmond at? Because they're going to sit down and say, is this list taking us north from 8th position? Is it taking us steady as she goes and we're just going to peter out and have to go back to the draft? Or do they cut and do they go with some kids? Because if you're saying there's no psychological outlet, their list is in trouble because it's clearly not good enough to match it with the big boys.
Yeah, I think it's middle of the road. I think it's whereabouts they are, just inside the 8, just outside the 8. I don't see it going north in a hurry. They need to add to this list.
So do they add with more recycled players who we were critical of early? They seem to have come good. Can they bridge the gap with recycled, or do they got to get more class in through the draft?
I don't care whether they're recycled or not. What they need is, the word you used, class.
Yeah, they do.
Don't recycle players for the sake of recycling them. They need more quality into that lineup.
That's right. And you're saying class as in kids, or you're saying class as in cherry picking from somewhere else?
Well, it's a combination of both, I suspect, but they haven't got enough polish. I think think their midfield at the present time has got a couple of guns in there. They need 3 or 4 because they found out on the weekend if you take Cochin out, if Miles isn't dominant, if Dustin doesn't come through, then all of a sudden there's not another wave. The issue, I think, was exposed just under pressure. Their offensive muck-ups or stuff-ups, if you like, were just a side that was out of their depth at this stage.
They didn't seem to handle the occasion. They were gun-shy. They were slow. They were fumbly. There was no assuredness whenever they had the footy, and that was rare because they were always under pressure.
Well, they did have a good player.
Some of the errors. I mean, look at this.
Yeah. How do you do that?
That's how you turn a terrific counter-attack into immediate pressure for your back six.
I reckon that Port Adelaide had the best dozen players in the game, maybe 14.
Probably.
It wasn't a good Richmond player, was it?
I'll give you an example of something else that typified the contest for me. And this is Hamish Hartlett going for a 50-50 ball. To the naked eye, it just looks like, a really good contest. One bloke rode the button. Have a look at the replay. One bloke wants the footy. One bloke wants the man.
So
that was the thing that stood out for me. Well, one bloke's already committed.
He can nearly reach it.
One bloke's reaching in for 2 hands with the ball. One's bracing for the contact, ready to take the man out.
Yeah, no, that was a phenomenal... it was one of the highlights of the round, in fact.
What do we make of all the talk about Trent Cotchin winning the toss and going notionally against the wind? I mean, is that just a furphy? Is that immaterial? I
don't think it was... It's not ideal when you're trying to get into a game, particularly interstate, but it doesn't excuse the way they played. Now, only Trent and the insiders at Richmond know the true rationale behind why.
And they would have had a rationale. It was either that they were trying to minimise the onslaught in the last quarter. It was that they thought they'd just trying to nullify the opening onslaught.
But you can't project to the last quarter. I mean, history tells you that. Wind can stop, wind can turn.
Right. But don't sit there and say it's swirling, we weren't sure. No, because 20 of 31 goals kicked to one end. You're out there warming up for an hour.
And that ground is in particular different because there's no stand at the northern end, which means the northerly is going to blow straight down the ground.
Tell me about this. A lot of mixed messages here about what captains do. Cameron Ling said he never spoke to the coach about which end he would kick to when he was captain. I find that staggering.
Why?
In a game of 1%ers, you're prepared to let the bloke go out there and maybe make clearly a wrong decision.
Would you not think that the captain's a reasonably intelligent, well-considered football smart person?
But he might actually, on a whim, decide to do something because he thinks we'll be better doing it this way. I mean, surely you have to... That's
How can you think you'd be better doing something one way if that isn't the pre-planning that's gone into the entire week's preparation?
So you reckon they all were party to this?
Well, I don't think he went out and did it off his own bat.
You don't?
I doubt that very much. That would be incredible if he did.
Well, I can't imagine that you go out there and you have your warm-up and you're kicking the ball and you're kicking him 20 metres going to the right of screen and 20 metres short to the left and you go against the wind.
So if that's right, there's no defence for that decision, is there? Because you've got to grab every advantage you can get
they have to wear
in a hostile environment.
They have to wear it. Whatever their rationale was, it didn't pay off. They needed to get themselves in the game early and they didn't.
Freo's an interesting story at the present time. Nothing went right for them getting to Sydney. Nothing went right for them in Sydney, and yet I thought they put up a very credible performance.
I think they were better than that. I think until the $10 million man burst onto the scene, that they were right in the game. They were alive in the last quarter.
They were, on the back of a lift from their midfield, Mundy in particular. Sandlands dominated the taps in the last quarter. But I didn't think the Swans are running as well as some in the first half of the ground as well.
But it's more difficult to run well against Freo, Jared, isn't it? It's a common link. It's much harder to play your offensive, aggressive footy when you're playing against the Dockers.
Yeah, look, I thought they managed to get themselves in the contest particularly well. Every time it looked like Sydney get a couple of goals up, they found a way to claw their way back in it.
Ross Lyon has built his side around rebuilding the midfield, famously, and he didn't miss them after the game, saying that if you're going to blame someone, don't blame Ballantyne, blame the midfield. And some of the numbers of their great midfielders were well and truly down, particularly in the first half.
Well, that's 32 possessions in the second half between Barlow and Mundy to 21 in the first half. So their work rate lifted, and that's why late in the game they did get themselves back in the contest until Buddy Franklin kicked a couple of outstanding goals.
And even still, whilst Barlow's numbers are reasonable in the second half, in fact they're quite impressive, I didn't think he had much impact on the game.
No, certainly not forward.
No, Mundy in particular I thought did. I mean, in the last half in particular, along with Sandlands, nearly got them across the line.
How good was the battle between Luke Parker and Nat Fife? Absolutely love. I love the fact that John Longmire's got confidence in Luke Parker to go head-to-head with one of the best players in the competition like that. And that's indicative of the season that Parker's had.
Because Parker's one of the best players in the competition.
He's a star. And I don't think he gets the kudos he deserves.
No, he doesn't. He'll be top 3 in their BNF, Jared.
Yep.
Well, you might even win it, Mike.
Yeah, I think Kennedy might... Anyway, he's certainly in the mix for top 3.
But look,
Sounds like you know.
Fife wasn't dreadful. Fife wasn't dreadful. He played well as well. But I thought Parker had the greatest influence. In fact, I gave him best on ground in the contest.
Yeah, well, look at those numbers. They are most impressive. It was hard footy all around, though, wasn't it? Both of these sides play the contested brand of footy. And you just wonder what toll it's going to take on Freo, even though they're back at Patterson Stadium.
But they're used to it, though. They play high attrition footy, don't they? That's the way they play.
Yeah,
they
that's
tackle,
true.
And they work hard.
But surely this is the way you expect two of the best teams in the competition to play the game.
Agreed, yep.
It's going to be interesting, though, because there was not this sort of ferocity against Richmond for Port Adelaide. So they've, in fact, had a soft win, if you like, whereas Freo have had a really tough loss. And some of their players, I mean, you say it's a war of attrition.
Yeah.
Does it take an effect in the last couple of weeks?
Well, it probably does. I mean, the longer we go, the more difficult it is to come up, isn't it, James?
It is, but they're battle-hardened. This is what they've peaked for.
You had an issue with Buddy Franklin when you were at Hawthorn. Clarko moved him up the ground. It was interesting, the whole tactical battle, given that Freo went in without another tall, and Ibbotson became a very effective player.
He did, and he positioned himself beautifully, Gary Ibbotson, and we saw him do this a number of times. And in particular, look at it. Why would you be kicking it there?
Yeah, exactly.
Now, he gave away a push, which is why he almost took the mark there, Buddy. But that is just ridiculous to be kicking it there. All of a sudden, you get him up with a bit more space, a bit more freedom. He'll find ways to get hold of the ball. And then look at the penetration on the kick, which ends up in a Jetta goal.
Were you surprised that it took so long to sort of break the stranglehold that Freo had on him?
No, well, not really. You've got to give him a time to settle in and see if he's going to still be that goal-kicking threat up forward before you move him further afield. We saw him starting on the wing there at that centre square. And this is what he can do. And this is what opened up the gap. This is what really gave them that breathing space.
That was one of the
no one else in the comp's kicked.
That is one of the greatest goals ever kicked on that ground. Where does he play if they get to the big dance? Does he play as the key or does he go up the ground?
He starts as the key.
Yeah, key. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. Talking about keys, I want to ask you about Adam Goods. Now, my honest opinion was at half-time, I thought Goodsy's going to have a serious look about whether he plays on.
He looked slow and
tired.
He did.
But I must say, I thought his second half was significant. I loved his third quarter. Hard work and skill, both of them. And he just did things that great players do.
The one thing he's never been have a problem with is kicking clutch goals. And it was a clutch mark, backed into a pack.
There was a clutch smother too, Jared.
And that was goal.
Now, I want to know, there's dissension about whether, in fact, that was deliberate and that was sort of the rugby play into Big Mike Pike, or did he just wildly kick it forward?
He hacked it forward because he thought that the handball option to outside wasn't the right one.
More credit than that.
Okay, that's fine. On the back of that good quarter or that good second half, does that mean you would say definitely play on next year?
I've changed my mind about it. I thought that certainly would indicate that he's still got plenty to offer.
Most underrated stat in footy is the Smother brothers, and the Swans had it all going on the weekend. Their numbers were incredible, and it has an enormous effect because it's not just a defensive act, it is an attacking act.
Equal most for the season, along with North Melbourne in that round 4 clash. And we were all watching the game in here in the studios, and I think everyone to a person said, how good are the Smothers? This is the difference between winning a game and losing a game, because they didn't allow Freo to clear the contest. And some of those Smothers were just blokes that were lunging with desperation to get fingertips to the ball.
Great teams do that.
Yep. Nick Smith was recognised for his great season. He's in the All-Australian squad, and Jetta is starting to come good at the right time.
Well, if Nick Smith's not in the All-Australian team, you'd probably be looking to lynch the selectors.
Yeah. Well, he plays on all the good smalls, doesn't he?
And he beats
them. Yeah. Jetta was significant, Jared.
I think he was, Mike. I think Pearce was opponent directly assigned to him. He got rid of him. He was winning ball inside and he was dominating on the outside.
Yeah, he was. I mean, I love his pace and his ability to use the footy.
Yep.
I mean, they're priceless on big grounds, aren't they?
Now, this is the contest that I think had ramifications, Jared. So he pushes forward, he gets on the end of it and he kicks the goal. And it was an important one. And I think he's an incredibly important player for the Swans. But the ramifications of that battle in particular, I think, you have a look here, there's a red jumper handed over. That was enough.
Does he get dropped or does he play?
He's got to play.
I think the coach has got enormous faith in Pearce, and I think he'll play.
Talking about red, I want to ask you about a redhead, Gary Rowan. What about his start to the game?
And I want to ask you the same question. He made some horrible clangers. I mean, this kick here cost them a goal.
Yep.
And this is, once you win that possession and you've got use of the footy, that's your opportunity to punish the other side. And he repeatedly basically blew it.
Yep.
This kick here is one of the worst, nearly has an air swing. Do you think he plays
No,
next
he stays.
week? Because I think he has to stay.
Particularly with Malcheski out. I'm a Rowan fan.
I'm sure Horse will back him in. Because he's got that run and that explosive speed. Just needs to make sure he picks the simplest options and hits them.
So what do they do?
He dropped his head after one of the early ones. I thought he's in trouble. Because you could tell that it was weighing on him.
He fought back though. Then all of a sudden they've lost a couple of half-backs. What do they do? Is Laidler come back in, or do they reshuffle and McVeigh goes back?
Look, in an ideal world, the best choice is probably McVeigh at half-back. But I don't mind Laidler, and it depends on who they match up against.
Having said that, Malcheski's not out of the running. Doesn't have a torn hamstring, and they're saying he's a chance to play. So we wait and see.
So he subbed out early in a game.
Yep, with tiredness, but they did the scan and there's no tear. So let me ask you, Jared, because we're talking about whether Port can do the miracle and come from outside the top four to make a preliminary final. They're going to have to deal with a bloke that gives the Freo midfield first use of the footy. If you saw some of Aaron Sandlin's ruck work, particularly in the fourth term, he was putting the ball wherever he wanted to put it.
I hope Lee Matthews is watching.
He probably has picked up on that, Mike, and would have been disappointed if you didn't mention it.
Again.
But you're right. I think what Port are going to have to do, they're going to have to make a decision. What do we do? And as much as young Lobie has been a star, he's going to have to deal with this. Now, Mike Pike had a great game. I think that should be recognised. But that is super service to a really dangerous midfield. Surely Boca Co, they're going to have to either lock down on the opposition, or they're going to have to rove to the big bloke.
Which all of a sudden takes away a little bit of the initiative that Port want to gain.
Should someone have been goal side of Mundy then?
Well, he was to start with, but he actually tapped it over the top of him, and Mundy read it, because he's 7 foot. You don't get any shorter as the game goes on.
No. Let me give you some numbers, fellas. It's the last 10-year results for the Bombers. They finished in 2005. 13, 15, 12, 12, 8, 14, 8, 11, 9 and 8th.
And fewer wins this year too, with Chapman coming in.
So I'll ask you the same question that I asked you about Richmond. Is their position an 8th, 7th, 8th going north, or is it a 7th, 8th holding and they've got to address their list?
I reckon their best is better than Richmond's, but their fluctuations have been crazy this year, haven't they? Yeah,
I'm not sure. There's still, I think there's still probably a couple of pieces of the puzzle missing if they're going to jump up into the top 6. But I mean, we know how bitterly disappointed Bomber Thompson was. Look at these numbers. I mean, you cannot play so well in bursts and then just cough up big leads. We're talking about half a dozen occasions where you're 6 goals in front.
And a great headline from you too, Mike. Can you just explain us to the rest of us?
Profligate Bombers, Jared, which means that you're a St Bede's boy. You should know it means wasteful.
Yep. Yes, I just had forgotten that particular one from English in 1978. Speaking of which, another great wordsmith, Patrick Smith, Mike, you were taken by an article he wrote this morning in The Australian.
Patrick Smith is the best connected political commentator in football. Now, he chose today to write this. The herd era at Essendon must come to an end for the sake of the club itself.
But this issue's been dead and buried now, Mike.
Exactly.
So why
and when Patrick Smith comes out, when it's dead and buried, and puts it back on the agenda, he's not doing that for practice.
So what does it mean?
He's not saying, I haven't got a topic, I'll dredge up an old one. Well, I don't know what it means, but also I also know that he knows.
Yes, you do. You tell us. You take us inside the A-grade journos. I mean, the timing of this is the interesting point.
Yes,
as
it
you
is.
said.
It is. Yeah. Well, I'm suspecting that someone in a high place or high places, and they do talk to Patrick and they brief him, has said to him that the issue's still alive.
But how can that possibly be, given the stance that Paul Little's taken, and the fact that Herd's back at the club now and they're ready to go?
Yes.
How can anyone else possibly pull strings that would change that?
All very good questions. All I know is I've got a tantalising question. I can't give you the answer. What did you make of it?
Well, you're running the story, Mike. The timing is interesting.
You, just before we leave it, you were quite interested when we talked about it beforehand. You wanted this up, didn't you? You thought that the column was worth discussing.
Well, for that very reason, I was hoping you'd have the answer, because I thought here's an issue that finally, after so much debate and discussion, has been put to rest, and here it is again.
Can you just clarify one thing? You said people in high places talk to him. Are you talking about Essendon high places or AFL high places?
All high places, Stuart.
All high places.
How can the AFL make that decision?
And the highest of places. Because they know things. He knows people who know things, Jace.
Does he know what Paddy Ryder's going to do, Mike? Because if he does, I'm going to pick up this
I'm happy to
tomorrow.
jump in on that. I think that Paddy Ryder wants out.
Well, I think the whole world thinks he wants out. Is he going to leave, though?
A lot of blokes, when they make a commitment to want out, they get out, don't they?
Well, he's at his best year. He's going to be an extremely attractive proposition for a lot of clubs.
He is. Well, we're going to move on. One of the great stories was the comeback win against the Bombers. It was the Kangaroos. And James Brayshaw, their chairman, the man who saved the Kangaroos, he's on the couch straight after this.
Stages here. Wells looking to nail the door here. Petrie gets a look. Inside out, right for Guyana. Boy, the last celebration was good. North up by 11 points. North Melbourne are through. The Bombers are out.
It was electrifying, one of the great finals victories for North Melbourne, and their chairman, James Brayshaw, joins us. Welcome to you, James.
Hey, Jared. Hey, boys.
First and foremost, what were you thinking at half-time? Because I think most of us thought you were dead and buried and the repercussions were going to be savage.
Yeah, I was sitting up in the City End second tier with the other either injured or reserves players.
Oxygen would have been short.
And I must admit, I started casting my mind back to 2 years before when we'd embarrassed ourselves in Perth, and I just thought, you know, we've done so much since then, and the players have worked so hard, and I just hoped that wasn't going to happen again. And then I thought about a couple of the games earlier in the year when we came back from big deficits, and I thought, well, we're not out of it. But I must admit, when Ats ran in and missed early in the third quarter, and then Chappie kicked one at the other end. Jeez, we've had our problems with Chappie, by the way. I thought, geez, this might be a long enough.
Do you contemplate going to the rooms in those sort of circumstances, or do you happy to stay where you are?
Yep.
So you resist the temptation to go there and say something?
No, I've never been in the rooms during the game. I don't think there's any place for that, is my own view. I think that
if you had gone into the rooms, what would you have been thinking of saying?
Yeah, well, exactly.
But from day one, you've shown unwavering confidence in Brad Scott.
Yep.
Extended his contract last year. It must have been almost a relieved feeling. We saw the emotion on Brad's face when the final siren went in the coach's box. You must have been thrilled for him.
I was delighted for him. An enormous box ticked for him, I think, but for us as a club too. I mean, Chief, you know this better than anyone with your former role. The whole club signs off on footy strategies a long way out and work really hard to bring players through, and you know, the recruiters and the list managers build a list, and so for that to culminate in a really strong performance in a final is very gratifying for everyone at the club, but mostly Brad, because he cops most of the criticism.
And just talking about that list that you're talking about needs to be built, what do the Kangaroos need now to go from a top 6 side to break into that top 4?
Well, it's interesting that Ben Brown played as well as he did, because I think most of us look at Drewy and say he's been unbelievably good, but he's got, you know, 2 seasons left, depending on how his body holds up. And big power forwards are almost impossible to find, especially the better you play, because obviously the better you play, the lower you look at the draft, and the real good ones are in the top 4 or 5 picks, and we haven't had too much of a look at those. So, you know, a power forward is really important. So Ben Brown has been an amazing story, and couldn't be happier for him, a ripper kid. So that's good, but probably, you know, that key forward presence is really important.
And how much do you get involved in recruiting? I mean, does Mitch Clark and Jared Waite, I know he's on the radar. You've been involved in recruiting before. I know you were instrumental in the Nick Del Santo recruiting. So what does your role become now?
Consulted more than anything else. Every now and then, you know, if it's a controversial one, the footy department staff will come and go, what are your thoughts on him, or what do you think should happen here? But, you know, they do all the work, and so they should.
Does the emergence of Brown alter your thinking on Waite? Because Petrie's got another couple, Waite's got a couple. You've got Black, who didn't have a great game, but he's the future. So it's going to be perhaps an interesting decision for you.
Yeah, well, again, Jared, these are decisions that we, you know, leave to the footy department and the list managers. They've been pretty good over the last 6 or 7 years, in my opinion. So, you know, I leave that for them.
Jimmy, you're a Perth boy, the son of the famous Ian Brayshaw.
Yeah.
What's the origin of your love for North Melbourne?
Well, growing up in the West, obviously all the superstars, you know, when I was sort of 9, 10, 11, when you start picking your club, all the superstars were from the West, pretty much. You know, you had Cabes firstly, and then, you know, the Cracker brothers and Roscoe and, you know, Phil Kelly, whose son's now doing a great job playing. Graham Melrose. You know, there was this just unbelievable list of West Australian stars who came in. They pretty much all seemed to play for North. And also, when I turned 10 in 1977, we won the grand final. It was the first time I'd ever seen colour television. So I saw this unbelievable green grass, and I saw this, you know, vibrant blue and white. And unfortunately for Ed, the black and white of Collingwood I'd seen for the previous 8 years on television. So it was just fate that, you know, North was the side. I've loved them ever since.
Now, the presidency's been a labour of love for you, and there's been a lot of pain along the way.
Yep.
You've had a running battle with Caroline Wilson over the years. You've got 2 years left. Do you then have to step aside, or do you plan to stay?
No, step aside. The constitution is that you get 3 terms, and that's it. And I don't mind that, to be honest. I think in the end of 2016, it'll be time for new ideas and new, you know, vibrancy, and you know, I welcome that.
Is there an heir apparent? Ben Buckley's on your board, isn't he? And Ben Buckley's...
Yeah, well, selfishly, I think Ben would be a phenomenal president of our club. Not sure if he wants to do it, but he's got a couple of years probably to have a look. But and you guys might have a bit of a say in that too, because he's got a high position at Fox Television. But I think he ticks every box. He's you know, former player of the club, great administrator, and you know, has a great corporate understanding too. So
one of the disappointments of last week, I think, was the debacle surrounding the jumper situation. In the finish, we had 2 clubs wearing their non-preferred jumper.
Yep.
You've got the Kangas and the Cats. You've played each other a number of times in your home strips. Have you been told what's going to happen this time around?
Actually, Mike just said to me before that we're going to play in the darker blue with the white stripes, blue and blue, which we don't mind playing in at all. The 2 jumpers we now wear are absolutely fine by us, that one there. So we got no issue with wearing that ever. And you know, I think the Cats finished higher than we did on the ladder, so they're entitled to wear the strip they want to wear. If the roles were reversed, we would too.
Jim, I know Mike's keen to talk to you about Tasmania and what's happening down there, but the Etihad deal, in your opinion, what does the AFL need to do to make Etihad more palatable to the clubs that call it home?
Buy it.
If that doesn't happen?
Well, I don't think there's much they can do. There's a contract in place, and you know, there's still not a lot that can be done within that contract, as I understand it.
So if they buy it, how does that help North Melbourne? Because
well,
you're still going to pay $8 for a beer and $10 for a pie.
Well, hopefully, Jared, what they do is they'd hand it over as a quasi-clean stadium. I mean, I know it wouldn't be totally clean, like say Skilled is or Simmons is for Geelong, but you know, you'd have much more control over signage. You'd have much more control over the boxes. You'd have much more control over the things within a stadium you can make money out of.
You've built your membership, but your support base at the games hasn't really increased as much as I'm sure you'd like. Will that help?
If ticket pricing doesn't come down, probably not, you know, because your membership is what it is, and the ticket prices are what they are. I disagree with that a little bit. I think, I haven't seen the figures, but I think, you know, certainly 40,000 members, and we've found anyway that games that haven't drawn in the past have drawn better in the last 2 years. So I think it's getting there.
Okay.
It's still got a way to go though.
Jimmy, long term, what's the perfect balance between North Melbourne playing wherever it is in Melbourne and your presence in Hobart?
I think 3's about right. I think, I don't know if any of you guys have been down to Bellerive or Blunston Arena, but it is a fantastic place to play footy. It's going to be even better with a new stand. We couldn't be happier with Hobart as a city. They've been so welcoming to us. So if we play 3 games there, I think it's the perfect fit. I think there's 4,500 members now in Tasmania. So it's been a great success. In fact, I would say, you know, in my time, it's been the thing that's been the greatest success as far as growing and introducing new people to the North Melbourne family.
But you've only got 2 years. You're only committed for 2 down there, are you not?
Yeah.
Is that a worry? I mean, councils change, or whoever makes the decision on those things.
Look, I think, well, Hawthorn have been a great example of this. The more successful you are, the harder it is to shift. So, you know, I think it's been a great success. We've loved it. I think they've loved it. So, you know, I'd expect in 2 years' time it'll be a rolling over.
James, Boomer Harvey, April the 2nd, 2011. He was very open, very honest in his assessment of some young players after a loss. This is what he had to say.
I think it's more our young guys not towing the line. The guys that are in between 20, 21 to 25 or 26 years old, these type of guys, Sam Wright, Lockie Hansen, you know, when are they going to step up? They either won't be playing in the team, or because the senior guys will go to the coach and tell them that we don't want them in the team.
Ironic, Sam Wright probably had his best game for North Melbourne on the weekend. Unfortunately, Lockie Hansen wasn't there. But was he more right than he was wrong? Because he got whacked for that, and ironically, he wasn't there on the weekend. He'll be back this week.
Oh, look, we would prefer players not to say things like that in public because, you know, you want to keep things in-house. But, look, I think what Boom was meaning, or not wanting to speak for him, is unless this group of players develop quickly, we're not going to go anywhere because we know how good a player Brent is and we know how good a player Drew is and you know what you're going to get from Spud Frito and, you know, all of the senior players who have been amazing, by the way. So I think what he meant was these young guys have got to rise for us to go beyond where we are now. And I think on the weekend we saw, I agree, Sam Wright was wonderful, and I think Brad Scott's got to take enormous credit there because his work with Sam Wright has been extraordinary. So I was really pleased to see Sam play as well as he did. But Ben Cunnington, you know, I mean, I remember before you took this job, Chief, the Roosie was pretty scathing on Cunners and probably had every right to be because we had to get 50 games into him, you know, and he was sent into the coalface against much bigger and stronger midfielders and he had to do his time, Ben, but geez, he was fantastic on the weekend.
Just before you leave us, you're running battle with Caroline Wilson. I mean, you're a chairman of an AFL club, obviously. She's the chief football writer for the Fairfax media. You don't talk, do you?
No, we're not overly fond of each other, but having said that, I don't think it's a battle. I mean, I think as we've got better, she's probably had less to pick us apart on. And, you know, we don't spend any time speaking to each other, but I don't spend any time worrying about it either. You know, he's got to get on with it. We think we're going in the right direction. We think we've got great staff and footballers and members and supporters, and the family's terrific, and we're delighted with where we are. So I focus more on improving that than worrying about relationships with other people.
Speaking of relationships, who are the players that keep giving up, Jim? Because we work a lot in radio together, and they're very happy to potch you when you're down the room stealing food or getting medical treatment when they should be. There's a few that have got your number, I think.
It's a disgrace. There should be a level of respect, Chief, for... well, Jamie McMillan, I know, is one. And what's worse is that you are the one who goes to them to get this information and then lag me with it, Chief.
Forthcoming, and Heath's been very good to us.
Yeah, well.
It was a fantastic win, really exciting and great vindication of your role as the chairman. Good luck for next week. The role may continue. You may be top four and then you may be even higher. Mike's put a window glass ceiling on you already.
Well, I know you've said a couple of times the man who saved. It's not one man. There's been a lot of people, an enormous amount of work, and we're really delighted that things are starting to go well.
Appreciate your time tonight.
Good on you, Jared. Thanks, boys.
James Brayshaw, the man who saved North Melbourne. We'll be back with more straight after this.
I love it. Well done, Jim.
Hawthorn still in a very dangerous spot. Ruffy! Yep. That's what he does so well, isn't it?
Well, now Mitchell on the outer side getting involved. High ball downwards for forward. And Smith outmaneuvers Duncan. Smith does some damage.
Lewis to finish it. They're into the prelim. Hawthorn, the defending champions, first into the prelim final.
In fact, they're into their fourth straight preliminary final, and it continues to roll on. The Hawks, despite Jason saying they'll go out in straight sets, they're looking pretty impressive, Mike.
As was the bloke in the number 5 Guernsey, Jared, Sammy Mitchell.
Well, you were his best ally on the weekend because you were the one who orchestrated Jordan Lewis getting tagged, and so Mitchell got off the chain.
Isn't that classical? You know, you sort of, if you've got guns like Mitchell and Lewis, and Geelong only use one tagger, whoever you let run free does the damage, doesn't it?
Yeah, but most teams, particularly when you get to the good teams, they have that many quality midfielders, you're never going to run with more than one player. I think from a Hawthorn perspective, perhaps the most pleasing thing was that even though Jordan Lewis was shut down compared to, I mean, he's been averaging 35 touches, he only had 20, he still found a way to have a big impact by kicking 3 goals.
His last quarter was great, and you're right, he just kept at it.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes, you may.
You mentioned about Chappie. Do you think Geelong erred in letting Cameron Ling retire?
No doubt about that. I mean, as good as Mitch is, Jason, he didn't like Lingy running around with him, did he?
No, look, Lingy was one of the best run-with players going around, but, you know, you can't have the best of both worlds all the time.
No, you cannot.
You've been one of the best cherry pickers in recent times, Hawthorn, you probably yourself included. Sean Burgoyne has been just one of the all-time great pickups. When you first got him, I was wondering about his knee, but Clarko was always convinced, played him across the half-back flank, they'd get 5 or 6 good years out of him. He's been better than that.
A few sweeter cherries than this one, Jared, and I reckon he's had the best 16 possession game I saw on the weekend because it's of things like this.
Yep.
It's the decision making.
Yep.
When most others would blaze away, he'd hold the ball and he'll pick the right option and he'll almost force the player to come to him. The body work there to actually get the clearance was brilliant. And this one here again. So he used his pace to break away. Roughhead's doubling back to the goal square, but he didn't want to bomb it. He waited and waited and made Roughhead come to him because he can deliver the ball on a platter.
Poise is underappreciated. This bloke, you mentioned about his decision making, but he knows where everyone is. He never loses his cool, does he?
And what
He's
he
a
also
super
did
player.
after that kick to Roughhead, which we didn't see, took a courageous mark standing in the hole. Now, that's not something you normally would have associated with.
In a game where there's 400 possessions per side each, roughly, we have to do better, I think, than just saying a guy had 35, because you can have 35 and have no wins. I think Dustin Martin had 29 on the weekend. Stokes had 25. I didn't think he did a hell of a lot with them. I wouldn't be surprised if he went forward and added a little bit of forward pressure for Geelong on the weekend.
One bloke where the stats did do injustice was Hill. I mean, his first half was outstanding, wasn't it? His run, his ability to get it and to use it. And here he is. I mean, it didn't matter what. This is a 1-on-2 here, and he wins it.
And it's a little bloke against two of the biggest blokes out there. I just love the fact that he continues to improve. He loves the game, and you can only imagine him getting better and better.
Jared, who would you take out of this Hill and the Hill at Freo?
Well, depends on what week, Mike. This kid's first couple of years, I think, have been better than Stevens because he hasn't suffered with the tag as much. Brad Hill seems to be able to deal with the one-on-one, but when you're up against a 6'5" ruckman, that was a wingman. That was a move that was either going to be a super win or a super loss. And Brad Hill, I thought, probably could have had another opponent a bit earlier. Who would you take?
I like the Hawthorn bloke. I think Stephen Hill's best is brilliant, but your bloke's, or the Hawthorn bloke's more consistent.
I think he's got a lot of upside too. Still learning.
Let me talk about Mark Blitzarves and give you some details.
You're keen on this, aren't you?
I am, because I want to show you his stats and compare them to Hamish McIntosh's. McIntosh played for 3 quarters and 7 minutes, and there's his stats on the left. Blitzarves went into the ruck from the 7-minute mark, and here's his stats. 8 disposals to 5. Ruck contests, he had 45 and he won 14. In 20-odd minutes, Blitzarves was involved in 11. He won 8 and 3 of those with the advantage, and he kicked a goal. I reckon they've got to take the punt on this kid and say, all right, let's put Hamish McIntosh out the pasture for a week. We may bring him back against Sandlands or against Port Adelaide if we get through. Take the punt on this bloke because Hamish McIntosh isn't working at the moment. He's not working hard enough.
So he could play Blitzarves on Goldstein, who does all the work for North, doesn't he?
He's always been considered an endurance animal, Hamish McIntosh, but on this occasion it was Hale that was pushing forward that actually caught him out a couple of times. You can see he gets caught ball watching here. He's looking back for the footy, and Hale's off and gone and gets forward into the space.
Well, here are the two of them, Mike. You can see Hale, he charges off to the right, and McIntosh is down the middle. He points out, and there's an opportunity for him to get on his bike and show some intensity.
Yeah, he hasn't got the zip, has he?
It's lacking.
He labours a bit.
So, on that basis, are you saying his position's in jeopardy, Jared?
I think it would be. I think he'd be very nervous till Thursday night.
Blitzarves one out with just Walker as a backup?
I'd have Walker as a second ruckman. You can throw Tom Hawkins into the ruck. He's done that okay as well. But I think they need something different, something to energise that midfield.
We watched David Hale there. One of the great decisions made by Hawthorn this year was to drop him about 6 weeks ago. He's come back a much better player.
Well, look, maybe it was the spur he needed, but it certainly got him working harder because there's 3 good ruckmen there down at Hawthorn. Segler's been terrific this year, but also McAvoy. So they know that if you're not playing well, the others will get a chance.
Is McAvoy any chance if injuries don't interfere?
No, not. Someone's got to get hurt.
Not at the moment. No. Not at the moment. I think they had a very solid performance the other night, and it'd be hard to see too many changes.
Joel Selwood, Jason, he is a great, as we know. He's the Brownlow medal favourite, and he's a chance to win the MVP. I want to show you some of his running power. There he is at the bottom of the screen, and Will Langford, who's no slouch, he's only a few metres behind him. Have a look at this. You almost have to run a kilometre these days per possession, and under fire, he kicked a great goal. He kicked 3 for the night. He was one of the best on ground, if not best.
I'd hate to think what would have happened to the Cats if he wasn't playing.
I agree with that. His work ethic, we all acknowledge that, and his bravery, but what doesn't get appreciated, his finishing skills. If you put the ball in his hands and he's just scoring, he'll score for you.
Yep. I don't reckon he's been great in front of goals over the years.
I do.
Set shots, I think it's been his kryptonite.
Well, not for me. I'm happy with the ball in his hands, and particularly on the run or set, I'm happy with him.
He's as fierce a competitive beast as you'd see, but he's also big on sportsmanship. And I thought there was a poignant moment in the car park underneath. Brad Sewell's playing his 200th, remember? He's just arriving. There's Joel Selwood, just says, "Yep, well done the 200, mate, but now let's get down to business."
It would have been a good story if you'd have snubbed him. He's in the car park.
That's respect. Let's talk about some of the best and fairest winners that have unfolded over the last 6 or 7 days.
There's a point I want to make here, Jerry.
Well, make it strongly.
And it's the first one. Daniel Talia has had an outstanding year for the Adelaide Crows. He's a lock for the All-Australian. But the players nominate 3 players from their own club to be eligible for the MVP Awards. That's the Players Association Awards. The Adelaide players didn't pick him. He wasn't in the 3.
So it was Smith, Sloan and Scotty Thompson, wasn't it?
And Scotty Thompson. Yeah. Why wouldn't Daniel Talia be there given the season he's had?
Rockcliffe picked it up. Zorko came second, just underlined his great effort. Rewald gets his 6th.
The significant one was Nick Rewald in number 6. So when you win 6 BNFs, I mean, you're in an elite company, aren't you?
I think disappointing the right word. Lenny Hayes ran 2nd. Sean Dempster ran 3rd. Lee Montagna ran 4th. Luke Delaney, recruited from another club, ran 5th. They'd love to see some of those younger names playing better consistent seasons and pushing up and taking that responsibility.
But it's an amazing tribute to Rewald.
Oh, it is.
I mean,
MVP tomorrow night. One of those players may pick it up. You're hosting it, Jason.
With Sandy?
Who do you think may win this one, Mike?
Joel Selwood would be my pick.
Would he?
He would.
You'll see it live tomorrow night.
Who would you pick?
I think Buddy might just jump up and surprise them all. The $10 million man, as you say. But Joel's obviously a very big chance. We spoke about Paddy Ryder. The other news story that has just filtered along since about July has been that of Mitch Clark. He featured in Your Mad Minute a couple of weeks ago, Mike, and it looks as if there's 3 options. He goes back to Melbourne, he goes into the draft because Melbourne can't do a deal with him, or they trade him on. What's going to happen?
Well, you can dismiss the first one. He won't be at Melbourne. I'm not sure. I think that they will trade. They've still got a hold on him, so they can trade. Correct?
Jared is very bullish that they won't trade him for good reason, Jared.
I think right from the word go, we spoke to Peter Jackson on 3AW about July 28th, and he said he was off the list.
Which was
incorrect.
Which was incorrect. Yep. He is still on the list. But I think he would have liked him to be off the list because I reckon it's part and parcel of their appeal for a priority pick.
The campaign for the priority pick. The priority pick, that's a gamble.
Understand it's a gamble.
If they hold him, they can trade him.
Yeah, what are you going to get? Pick 45 or pick 50? Well, you're better off throwing away pick 50 and having a genuine crack.
He won't go higher than pick 50, you say?
He's got a problem with his Lisfranc Frank ligament. You're going to have to pay him a fair dollar, and he hasn't played footy for a year and a half.
He'll be playing AFL football next year, Jared.
Where will he be playing?
Well, if I had to guess, it'll be a Melbourne club, and he was seen at the Westpac Centre last Friday.
Was he?
I tell you what.
He was, or his manager?
I don't think he was looking at Bobby Rose's statue.
Was it him or his manager?
Well, the camp.
Oh, the camp.
Michael, the Collingwood Football Club wouldn't mind another marking forward, would they?
I think they'd be happy with one.
Given the struggles they've had tried Quentin Lynch,
they wouldn't mind one.
Jesse White, they'd love Mitch Clark.
Heredia Lumumba, whilst you're running hot on Pies.
Yep.
Where's he going?
I don't think Melbourne's the fit. Not sure where. He's too good of a player not to go somewhere. If I were involved with a top 4 team, I would seriously look at him and hope that my culture was good enough for him to be able to fit in.
It's hard not knowing the inner workings of how that's all played out.
If Clarko said to you, what do you think about us pursuing an interest in Lumumba, what would you say?
Oh, I'd say, mate, if there's a role that you think he's going to fulfil that we haven't got covered, go for your life.
What would you say if he asked you for your gut feel?
I don't think he fills a hole that Hawthorn needs filled.
It's a very big gut and a very big feel. And after this, the MRP may get a serve. Stay with us.
Hold me back.
Come on. Lee Matthews questioned your courage in a game once?
Yeah, he did. It was out at Waverley and Rod Gritter and I ran for a ball. He was coming off halfback and I ran, and the ball sort of went one way and I went to turn and Gritter grabbed it and it looked, I don't know, it must have looked weak to me. Anyway, after the game, Lee said, we had a couple of blokes who didn't run hard enough at the ball, and I wore that. I drove home, or I think my wife drove home, and I had a few grogs, and I think it got to about 2 o'clock in the morning and I was still soaping over it, and I'd never want to be questioned in that area again, and I rang him up. I was pretty well gone, but I rang up and said, if you reckon that I pulled out, I'll resign right now.
Don't miss it, the great Tony Shaw, open and honest. And forthright as usual with Open Mike. It's your Mad Minute, Mike.
And I need it tonight, boys.
You promised money, deliver.
Had Ben Stratton gone to ground on the end of Tommy Hawkins' jumper punch on Friday night, Hawkins is rubbed out and Geelong can't win the flag. Now, if that, I don't care that the bloke picks up a handful of jumper, he punched him in the face. Yeah. That's a disgraceful decision by the MRP to say that is insufficient force to impose any penalty at all.
Look, I thought he was probably lucky not to get a reprimand and maybe some points hanging over his head. You wouldn't want to see him rubbed out for that, but you can't go around doing that.
Take the jumper out of his hand, he's punched him in the face with a fist.
Gets weeks.
That is a staggering decision. As Alan Schwab said years ago, Jared, the rules change in September.
Well, they certainly have on that occasion. I'd agree with you. I would have thought there were 70 points and he's got 90 carryover. So
he's the one bloke that can't afford to lose.
Correct.
Let me tell you.
And they need him to actually step up and kick some big goals on the weekend. Mike, Bluey McKenna, there's a lot of speculation. Will he be at the Gold Coast next year?
He's contracted to be at the Gold Coast, but there's no question there's a level of disquiet there. Their finish of the season was poor. They were 7-2 before the halfway mark. They finished 10-12. There's a review going on at the moment.
Is it a normal review? Or?
No, I think it's a more extensive review than normal. The way they finished the season has put him under the hammer. Now, Bomber Thompson's a wild card in this situation because Bomber Thompson's now a dual premiership coach who's suddenly available. I would be uneasy if I were Bluey, but he does have the contract.
I'm still waiting for you to answer Jared's question.
Will he be there?
Yeah.
Well, I don't make the decision.
He's asking for your opinion.
Who does make the decision?
Malcolm Blight.
Blighty. He's as powerful as Jason.
So will he be there?
I'm not sure, Jace.
It's not
but it's possession's 19.
One more go, Mike.
Your little gut feel. Your little gut feel. What does that say?
Mike is sitting on the fence. We'll have more answers for you next week. Thanks for your company.